The new Dungeons & Dragons minifigures are here, and they are perfect for customization. Today I want to show you some figures that I made and give you some ideas for making your own fantasy characters. Starting off with the Dragon Paladin, I turned him into a regular knight. I'm not the biggest fan of Dragonborns for my fantasy world, but this printing is awesome for a heavily armored knight. I decided to take the armor piece off and leave the torso exposed because it's a really beautiful print under there, and also because capes don't fit very well with the new armor piece. I gave him these old chrome parts, and I think it gives him a really clean and fancy look. Overall, I'm really happy with this figure. I took the extra armor piece and put it on one of my crown knights as to not waste it, and I think it matches really well with these silver and gold plated legs. Definitely make use out of extra parts when you're making customs if you can. Another standout figure of this series was the Dwarf Barbarian, and I knew these parts would make some awesome Vikings, and I decided to make a super kitted out Viking. I started with the torso as a base, but then I extended the axe with a longer handle, and I think it fits a lot better for a full-sized human. I took the legs from the Series 25 Barbarian, and the fur print as well as the dark red color match up super well with this torso. Next, I took the helmet from the Hun Warrior because the fur matches up really well with the fur printing, and then I of course had to take the Series 4 Viking shield to match up with this Viking custom. This is one of my favorite minifigures I made out of these, and it's definitely getting me excited to start a Viking army. Another one of my favorite figures out of this series was the Forest Druid, and out of them, I made a Forest Warrior. My only real complaint about the original figure was not having a pair of full-size printed legs, but I think I found an option that's super accessible and that works super well. The Goat Herder legs from Series 25 match perfectly with this figure, and they're still really cheap to get, so if you want to army build this figure, I would definitely recommend these. Another part that matches really well with this figure is this old stag shield from the Series 3 elf, and the horns on it just match perfectly with the horns on the hood, and I definitely would like to get some more of these, although they're extremely expensive. To finish off the figure, I used this brown and silver rubber tipped spear, and that just overall completes the Forest Warrior look. Overall, I'm super happy with this figure, but let's move on to the next one. Tasha the Witch Queen has some amazing prints that are just primed for making customs. With her, I made an assassin / ranger type fig. I used this dark red hood and Mando cape to match the printing towards the top of the torso, and I think it matches the color scheme really well. For her weapons, she has a longbow and then the dagger from the Githyanki Warlock, and I think this looks awesome for an assassin type figure. To finish her off, I used this rugged eye patch print, and I think this character looks great. One of my favorite characters in this series is this Githyanki Warlock, and I decided to turn him into a battle mage. I wanted to show that he was clearly geared up for battle and not just an ordinary wizard, so I gave him this gold cutlass from the elf bard, and then I gave him this dark blue mask that looks absolutely sick. LEGO doesn't make a dark blue wizard hat, so I just gave him the long black hairpiece from Strahd von Zarovich, and then I also gave him his cape because it was dark blue and it matched the color scheme really well. Finally, I built a simple wooden staff for him with a blue crystal to symbolize blue energy to go with the blue color scheme, and I absolutely love the look. Overall, I'm super happy with this character. Now, a couple of figures that I wasn't too impressed with was the Aarakocra Ranger and the Elf Bard, but I combined their torso and legs and created this cool yellow skin-toned elf figure. This guy actually has parts from 4 of the different minifigures, and I'm really happy that we got the Githyanki hairpiece with yellow ears because it can be easily used for an elf. These torso and legs honestly look excellent together, and I really like the uniqueness of the dark orange color. I gave him the bird from the Forest Druid, and it really gives a foresty elf type vibe that I was going for. I also gave him this old Lord of the Rings blade, and I think it has a very elvish look. I just think it works perfect with this figure. Overall, this character looks great, and I'm glad that I could turn a couple of my less favorite CMFs into an awesome looking fig. Now, the torso for the elf bard isn't quite as versatile as the legs, but I used it for a simple knife merchant. For this guy, I wanted to give him an old withered look, and I recently got some of the hobbit beards that I had been eyeing up for a while, and I wanted to use one of them for this figure. I used Oin's beard, and I think it matches super well with this face print, and I think it gives a lot of personality to this character. For the legs, I used these legs from the medieval blacksmith, and I think they match up really well to the printing. Although fairly simple, I'm really happy with how this minifigure turned out. The Tiefling Sorcerer is a figure that I wasn't so sure about initially, but after doing some customization, I've made a couple of awesome customs that I'm really excited to show you. Starting off, I've created a simple wizard. I gave this guy the staff from the Gith Yankee with the eyeball, as I think that looks really cool. And then I also gave him a purple cape to match the color scheme, and I really think it elevates the figure. I would love to get a purple wizard hat to complete the look, but I had to work with what I had for now. These parts are perfect to match with the tax collector's parts from Pick-a-Brick, and I definitely want to order some at some point and try out some different combinations. Overall, this wizard looks awesome, but let's move on to the next custom. For the next figure, I made a tiefling dragoner for the red dragons. I wasn't originally going to have any tieflings in my fantasy world, but I thought this was just perfect. I used an old camo that I had, and that fixes the problem with the tail that creates that little orange line, and I'm super happy how it looks. This has inspired me to add a couple of tieflings to my fantasy world, and if you guys have any ideas, let me know. Overall, this is a pretty simple figure, but I'm really happy with how she turned out, and it's definitely getting me excited for building up a red dragon army. Next, you have Strahd von Zarovich. Now, his printing isn't the most versatile, but I do think it makes for a really good noble, and that's what I've done here. For this guy, I actually took the cape pieces from Zaz Tam, as I thought they really worked well with the color scheme, and it gives him a bit more of a fancy look. Now, I used the somewhat goofy looking head from the goat herder, but I think it gives the figure a lot of personality, and I'm personally a fan. I also gave him the cut piece that Strahd came with, as it makes sense for a noble to have some sort of wine or whatnot. Overall, it's a simple character, but I felt a bit limited on what I could actually do with the torso and legs. If you guys have any ideas, let me know. Next up, we have the Mind Flayer, and as I mentioned in my review, I had a pretty specific idea for this guy, and that was to turn him into a cultist. More specifically, I've decided to turn him into a cultist of Basil the Batlord. I used the Evil Knight face from Series 7 because it has these glowing red eyes, but still a yellow skin tone, because I wanted them to be human but have a sort of evil and possessed look. I used Basil the Batlord's helmet because I absolutely love the look of it, and it's Basil's cult, so it makes the most sense. I'm using the Batman cape right now, but I might switch to a complete over-shoulder cape to give it more of a cloaked look in the future. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Overall, I'm really happy with the design of the figure, and I definitely want to include them when I make an update on my Fright Night army, but if you guys have any suggestions for improvements, I'm always happy to hear them, so let me know. Next up, we have the character which I think is the least useful in terms of parts, and that is the Lady of Pain. I've decided to turn her into an elf sorceress. I had a really hard time figuring out how I was going to use this dress in a custom, as there's not an orange wizard hat to really match for a wizard, and even then the bright orange just seemed a bit much for medieval times. For this fig, I used the hair from the Series 17 elf, and then I used this face print that has this little crown pattern, and I really think that fits with the character well. I used these transparent orange pieces to sort of have an orange magic vibe, and I really think it ties the whole character together. I'm really happy how she turned out. For our final minifigure, we have Zaz Tam, and this is another pretty hard to customize figure because of that big skeleton rib cage in the middle of the torso. I decided to turn him into a council member of the Lion Knight King. I realized as I started customizing the torso that a lot of beards covered up most of the rib cage, but this was the one beard that covered up the entire thing. I didn't do anything too special with this figure aside from giving him an older face print and some white hair, but I also gave him the book from Tasha the Witch Queen, as it makes sense for some sort of counselor or advisor. He's a really simple character, but I'm just happy that I could find some use of this torso and dress piece outside of some sort of skeleton. So anyways, that is it for these custom figures. Let me know what your favorite was, and if you guys have any plans for making some customs with these D&D minifigures, let me know that as well. If you guys have any suggestions for improvements, feel free to let me know, and if you haven't already, subscribe because I make Lego Castle content every Saturday. As always, thank you for watching.